Join me as we learn Chumash for Shabbos, Parshas Behar-Bechukosai combined. This is the seventh Torah reading, Chazak, where we will be concluding the book of Leviticus. Yesterday we began by learning about the laws of evaluations when a person donates property or a human value to the Holy Temple. Today we continue with donating and redeeming property. We will then go into the laws of tithing and as well of the evaluations and redeeming the second tithe and tithing animals, the laws pertaining to it. Chapter 27, verse 16. If a man consecrates part of his inherited field, Yakdish Ish Lashem, he dedicates it and makes it holy for God. Then the value will be determined according to an area of barley seed, which we talk about the area measured by a chomer, which is 7 bushels. B'chamishim shekel kesef, at the value of 50 shekel of silver. How does this work? Let's look in Rashi. V'hoya erkecha lefi zari, v'loi kifi shivya. This over here, the Torah is telling us that when it comes to this type of field, there's another way of how we're going to value it. And this is going to be based on the area of the property. V'loi kifi shavya, not according to its worth. Achasad teva, whether it's a good field, v'achasad ra, whether it's a difficult field to plow with, pita nektesha shava, to be able to redeem it, the equal will be the same. And how do you do this? Base kur item, a field which you're able to plow with it, a kur, which is a chomer, which we gave the number of about 248 liters, 7 bushels, would be redeemed b'chamishim shkalim with 50 shekel, which is about 800 grams of silver. Kach gzeiras hakosov, this is the decree of the verse, this is the amount you give. And this is talking about over here when the person's going to pay to redeem it at the beginning of the Jubilee year. But if he's coming in the middle of the Jubilee year, that means there's a bunch of years left. Then he has to go according to how many years are left. Sela, who put in the whole shana. Then he has to give a sela, which is a shekel, for every year. And that means a sela, and then a pudin, which is a smaller coin, for every year. Lefi. Because the field only becomes sanctified, holy, only for the years of Yovel. Because if the owners are going to have to redeem it, then they can have that 20%. Harei is wonderful. If not, the treasurer, he then sells it for its value, how much it's worth, to somebody else without the additional 20%. And the person that buys it keeps it out of Yovel until the Jubilee year, like any other field that's sold. When it leaves the person's hands, meaning in the Jubilee year when a second buyer gets it, it goes back. It doesn't go back to the temple. It only goes to the Kohanim, Shalaisa Mishmar, for the family of the Kohanim who are working in the Holy Temple that Yom Kippur. Shayevel Pegea by in the Yom Kippur that Jubilee is at. And then they divide it. This is the law when it comes to somebody who dedicates a field. Will say and he says when we get later on, when we're going to talk about the field, he's going to explain it in detail. Verse 17. As we're going to see now, the Torah explains what Rashi just mentioned. If a person dedicates his field after the Jubilee year, then it retains its full redemption value, which would be 50 shekel per chomer, per barley seed. What happens if a person, Rashi, if as soon as the Jubilee year passes, right away he gives it to holiness, and this guy comes to redeem it right away, according to this value, he gets it 50 shekel, he would have to give. But what happens if the person comes and he gives his field after a year of the Yovel? Then the Kohen has to calculate the money according to the remaining years until the Jubilee year. And it's deducted from the value of what the person had until the year that he sold it from. Let's see Rashi. Rashi. Or if he made it, sanctified it right after the Yovel, but he kept it by the treasurer because he couldn't find any buyers. And this guy's now coming to redeem it after the Yovel. So now the Kohen has to evaluate. He makes a calculation. What's the calculation? So the Torah tells us, the Torah says it's 50 shekel for 49 years. What does that mean? Hadei shekel kol shana. So it's a shekel per year. The shekel yasser al kulan, plus 1 shekel at the end. So if you take that 1 shekel, so it's 50 shekel for 49 years. So it's a shekel and something per year. A shekel arba shemina pundin. A shekel is made up of 48 pundin. Hadei selo pundin l'shana. So if you do the calculation, you get a sela, which is a shekel, and 1 little bit of a coin per year. So you're missing a little bit because it's really 48 shekel, so you're missing a little bit for every single year. That little extra, that little extra will be considered for a surcharge. And therefore, the person who's coming to redeem it, should act in a generous way. Pidyon, he should give 1 sela and a complete pidyon, even though there's a little bit extra that he should be able to get. L'chol shana for every one of the year, l'shana manisadis for the remaining years, hashnas hayevel until the yevel. V'nigra me'erkecha, you then deduct the amount of the value, minyan hashan with the amount of years that already passed from yevel, hashnas pidyon until the time that he's actually redeeming it. Verse 19. But if he comes to redeem the field, Amakdash said the same person who dedicated it. Then, as we mentioned previously, you have to add 20% on it, a fifth, and then he can get it. Rashi says, whatever amount you deduct it, whatever price you come to, you add 20%, you add a fifth, and that's what he pays to be able to redeem it. Verse 20, but if he does not redeem the field, or if he sold the field to somebody else, it can no longer be redeemed. Rashi, verse 20. The guy who made it, dedicated it, didn't buy it. Or if the treasurer sold it, no longer could go to the original owner. And as we mentioned, what's going to happen with the Jubilee years? Let's see, next verse. Now when it comes to the Jubilee year, what happens to the field if the original owner didn't buy it back? Or the treasurer already sold it to somebody else. Then it's Kodesh Hashem, it already stays sanctified to God. This now becomes inherited property to the Kohen, and it belongs to the Kohen as his inheritance. Rashi. So the person who bought it from the treasurer, when it comes to Yovel, now goes back to its original owner like all other fields. Like any other buyer who the field leaves the property of the buyer and goes back to the original owner. But in this case, it's not going to the original owner, it's going to the Kohen. It doesn't go back to the holiness that they can now to the temple charity, so now it can be used for other things, or to the treasurer. Ella, the pasuk tells us it goes like a field which is dedicated and designated to give to the Kohen. As it says, that all the special things that are designated go to the Kohen. Avzu, so to this, will be divided to the Kohanim of that shift, of the Yom Kippur of the Jubilee year that is at that moment. Verse 22. But if it's a field, if the person gives a field to God that he had purchased, that it's not something that he inherited, Yakdish Hashem, that's what he's giving to God. Rashi, Chiluk over here, the Torah is making a difference between stei miknasi l'stei achuza, a field that he bought to a field that he inherited. Stei miknali tischalek l'keina b'yevel. A field that a person bought does not go back to the Kohanim in the Jubilee year, because the person can only make it holy until Yovel. Sharei, because when he bought a field, the field was never his. Because in the field that he made holy, that field initially, when it was going to come to the Yovel, to the Jubilee year, would have to go back to the original owners. Therefore, now it can't go to the Kohen, because it's not his field completely. Therefore, in Balagola, now if he comes to redeem it, he has to redeem it with this money, which is for an inherited field. She'im lo yigal, because if he's not going to redeem it, and now the treasurer is going to sell it to somebody else. Oyim yigal hu, or if he's going to redeem it, b'shnas hayefel, in the year of the jubilee year, yashiv asada, the field is going to go back lasher kanomi, to the person that he bought from, and that guy that made it holy. That means the guy that made it holy, who he bought it from, not the Kohanim. Upen Tomer, you may say lasher kanoi, the one who bought it from. Lekechas achron, should go back to the original, the buyer. Meitoi, v'zeh gizber, and that should be the treasurer. That's why it has to say to the one who had inheritance, as we're going to see in the next verse, because it's telling you to the one, in this verse it says to the one who has the inheritance, meaning the original owner, the one who inherited it, who sold it, the guy that sold it then made it holy, the one who made it holy, then the treasurer then sold it to another person. So that goes back not to the buyer, but to the original owner who inherited first, and that's by the Jubilee year. However, if I have an inherited land, and I dedicate it to holiness, and then it comes to the Ovel, then it goes to the Kohanim, because I'm the original owner of the land. Verse 25. Verse 23. Verse 23. So how was this done? As we mentioned previously, Rashi gave us the whole detail in this of what the next few verses are about. The Kohen will then calculate the value remaining of until the Yovel year. And will give that value by Yom on that day. Kodesh Lashem will be sanctified to God, to keep it in the tabernacle. However, when it comes to the actual Yovel year, Yoshev Asada, the field will they'll return. Lasher kanomite, to the person who he purchased it from. And that means not the treasurer who bought it, not the buyer. Lasher lo yachuz asad, it's the first original person who got it as an inheritance. Verse 25. Anytime you do an evaluation, it must be according to the sacred shekel. Esrim geira yashakel. The valuation of the sacred shekel is always going to be 20 geira per shekel. Verse 25. Rashi says, anytime when it talks about evaluation, and the word shkalim is b'shekel HaKodesh, we're talking about the holy shekel. Esrim geira, 20 geira, esrim moyis, 20 money. This is the way it was originally in the time of the first temple. However, later on in the era of the second temple, the sages said that the shekel HaKodesh, the holy shekel, should be evaluated higher, and therefore they said it's 20 shekel plus a sixth. They added a person to give the sixth onto it. Amr Rabbi Seinu, the rabbis explained in the tractate of Bechoros, Sheish ma kesef dinar. 6 ma, silver ma, is what makes a dinar. A dinar is then 24 mois, lasela to a sela, and therefore not only esrim, not only 20, but they made it 24, a little more than it was initially. Verse 26. Ach bechoir. Now we come to the laws pertaining to the firstborn animals. Ach bechoir asher yivukar lashem. Although no man is allowed to, ach bechoir asher yivukar lashem abema. However, when it comes to a firstborn that a person may give as a firstborn to God, lo yaktish, you don't have the right to consecrate it. Isha say im sheirim sel Hashemhu. Though no person's allowed to make a firstborn animal, since it has to be brought as a sacrifice anyways, but whether it be an ox or a sheep, it belongs to God, and therefore you don't have the right to make it a sacrifice. As Rashi explains, lo yaktish isay. Over here, the Torah is telling us, l'shem karbanachal afi shein shaloi. You cannot. A person cannot make it holy because it is already holy. It's not yours by the very fact that it was born as a firstborn. Verse 27. What if? Now we're talking about redeeming other kind of entities. If a person makes an animal that's forbidden for consumption, and he makes it as something holy, he wants to donate it to the holy temple. Therefore, he must redeem it by paying for its value. And he adds on 20%, a fifth. But if he does not redeem it, then he has to be sold to its value. The buyer doesn't need to pay an additional. The money paid by the owner goes and is used for the upkeep of the holy temple. Let's see Rashi, verse 27. Verse 27, Rashi, This verse is now a new law. It has nothing to do with the firstborn. We're not talking about a firstborn, a non-kosher animal that you will redeem it. Because when it comes to the redeeming of a donkey, which we talk about, you have to redeem the firstborn donkey that's done with the sheep. And not only that, who's the sheep given to? It's given to the Kohen and it's not given to the Holy Temple. Over here we're talking about when a person gives a separate item. A person decides to give a non-kosher animal and he wants to donate it to Hekdesh. Because the previous verse before in verse 11 was telling us that if a person gives and he has to redeem an animal that became blemished. And over here it's talking about when a person dedicates an animal which is not holy, meaning a non-kosher animal, for example a horse, a camel or a donkey, which any of these animals are now to be brought as a sacrifice. He dedicates it towards the Holy Temple for the upkeep of the Holy Temple. What does the treasurer do? He sells it and then uses the money for the Holy Temple. Whatever the Kohen evaluates and appraises that this should be. But if it's not redeemed through the owners, if the owners then say, take this camel and they sell it and want to redeem it and give the money, they have to have 20%. Then if the treasurer himself does it, he sells it to somebody else, then he takes the money, whatever money comes from it, and he uses it for the Holy Temple. Verse 28. Over here we're talking about segregating and making something holy for Hashem. Although it's generally possible to redeem anything, however, certain things, any person that a person segregates for God from his property, from whatever he owns, whether it be a person, a behema or animal, from inherited land, property, you cannot sell it, it cannot be redeemed. Anything which is segregated, that means it's been designated as sacrifices. It is a superior holiness and must be given to Hashem, as we're going to see as follows. If a person comes along and says, I want this to be segregated for God, or let's say he wants to say, I want it to the Kohen, it has to go to the Kohen. If a person says, I want it to go for the upkeep of the Holy Temple, it'll go for the Holy Temple. But what happens if a person says, I want this to be holy? The rabbis have a difference of opinion. Some say, that if a person just says it without any description, it can go for the upkeep of the Holy Temple. What do I have from here? Because it says that anything that's segregated should be yours. It's talking about Kohanim, giving dedication to the Kohanim. So if a person says clearly, if a person says, I want this to go to the Kohen, and some say, no, anytime there's no clear definition, it goes to the Kohen as well. He cannot redeem it, he cannot buy it back. He has to give it to the Kohen. This is, as Rashi explains, that anytime a person says something wants to be holy, it goes to the Kohen. So therefore they explain this verse to mean, when a person says, does not explicitly state what he wants this holy thing to go for. However, the other opinion that says that whenever a person says just plain, I'm dedicating something to holy, it goes for the upkeep of the Holy Temple. He explains this verse to mean when a person is dedicating it clearly to give to the Kohen. Because everybody agrees that when it comes to redeeming things, if a person says something should go to a Kohen, there's no way that a person can buy it back, redeem it. It only has to go to the Kohen and the way it is. The Kohen has to get it, and then the Kohen can decide what he wants to do with it. However, things that a person dedicates to God, niftim, they can be redeemed, like things that are given to upkeep of the Holy Temple and things of that nature. Kol chedem kedesh kadashim. This is ha'omer stam chadam l'bedek habayis. If a person says that in general any things that a person dedicates goes for the upkeep of the Holy Temple, meviraya, he brings a proof from this verse. Ha'omer stam chadam l'kayim, the one that says whenever a person says something plain, he's dedicating something for holiness, it goes to the Kohen. Mefarish, he explains kol chedem. When it says over here, all dedicated things are of superior holiness, lamed, it comes to teach me shecher mekehanim, that whenever something gives to a Kohen, a dedicated something cholim, they go so, al koche kochim, they even apply into an animal which was made of superior holiness as an ascent offering. Val koche kalim, it'll also go on either things that have a lighter holiness, for example, a peace offering, and he gives it to the Kohen, not the actual animal, but the value of the animal. Like it's explained in the tractate of Erchin, Im Neder Nesan Demeyan, if he makes a vow, he has to give the value to the Kohen, and the actual animal goes is brought as a sacrifice, but it's of a donation. He gives something that's worth it. He has to give something of the same value, worthy of it as well. So therefore, when we talk about over here, when a person makes a promise to bring in a scent offering, and he dedicates an animal for it, and afterwards he says, I'm segregating this thing, even though if the animal itself can't give, he cannot give because it's the Kohen's now, but still in all, he's responsible. Let's say if the animal itself, he can't give because let's say the animal died or got injured, he has to give the value of it to the Kohen, because since he still owns it. And therefore, once he gives the value to the Kohen, he wasn't obligated yet to bring an animal. However, if a person says, I want this animal to be an ascent offering, then he has to, then the obligation is you have to see how much a person would buy for the animal for cheaper as it goes into the details, and with that exact money that he sells, he has to give that money to the Kohen as well. May Adam, whether it's a person, whether the Torah tells us that the same way a person can consecrate and dedicate certain items to give, so too a person can give a human. What kind of human? For example, maidservants, we're talking about non-Jewish ones. However, Jewish ones he doesn't own, so he doesn't have that ability to give them to the Kohen as well. Verse 29. Any segregation of value of such a person that has been given, that has been segregated, cannot be redeemed. Mina adam of a human, lo yipad cannot be redeemed. Mois yumas, since the person it has to be ampated, since the person is to be put to death and has no monetary value in this regard. What does this mean? Let's understand what this says. Rashi says as follows: Kol chedem asher yecharem. What does this mean? Does you really think that because Ruvain made somebody else holy, he gets killed because of it? So it says, the Chachamim explained as follows, what this verse means. Hayoytze lahadik. If somebody was ruled against him that he should be killed, ve'omar echad erki alai, and the guy says, you know what? I want to dedicate that guy who's going out to be killed, I want to give his value to the holy temple. Le'omar kol, it's as if it's nothing worth. Meaning, the guy says that as long as a person is, if the person's going out to be killed and then he says, I want to give my value to the holy temple, Maisumas, the Torah says, he's going to be killed. Therefore he has no value. That means, what is this talking about? What is this verse telling us? That if a person says, while he's being killed, because he was already ruled that he's liable of capital punishment, so he tries to find a trick to say, I want to dedicate my life to the holy temple. I want to give my value to the holy temple. You have no value. You're about to be killed. And therefore, he just has to be killed. Maisumas, he's killed. Verse 30, so too when we talk about all tithe that of the land, whether it's from the seed of the land or from the fruit of the tree, Lashemu, it goes to God. Kodesh Lashem, it's holy to Hashem. What we're talking about over here is the Meiser Sheni. We're talking about Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni, which is called Kodesh. Meiser Sheni was that there was a certain period during the time of the produce, when we go in the sabbatical year, went in errors of 6 years. So there was the first, the second, the fourth, and the fifth year of the sabbatical year. You had to take a certain amount of the second tithe, and you had to bring it to the holy temple in Jerusalem, and you had to consume it there. That's what we're referring to over here, and therefore it's called Kodesh. The first tithe had to be given to the Levi, and when we talk about that, was called Meiser Rishon. And then they were from what kind of produce had to be brought the second tithe. So mizera aretz dagan, which is from the 5 grains: wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. Those are the 5. Those are the 5 grains that were liable of Meiser Sheni. However, kitnius, which means legumes or other seedlings, were not liable to biblical obligation of Meiser Sheni, only rabbinic. Priya 8. Also, as well, they had to give Meiser Sheni. Second tithe was from Tirei Shvitzer, wine and oil. also you had to give tithing from as well. Lashemhu, K'noah Hashem, God acquired it, Mishulchani belongs to him. And God commanded you to go eat it in Jerusalem. As we look in the book of Deuteronomy, it's explained this a little detail. And you'll eat it before God, your God. The tithing of your grains and your fruits and your winery. Verse 31. If a person redeems some of his second tithe, then he has to add a fifth onto it. That means, let's say a person says, I can't bring all my produce up to Jerusalem and eat it. He can redeem it, add a fifth to it, and spend the money then in the Jerusalem. It has to be his. He cannot redeem somebody else's. However, if somebody redeems a friend's tithe, he does not add 20% at the fifth. How would he be able to do it? If the person can redeem it from its holiness, that means he pays its value of it. Like this, he's allowed to eat it b'chol makim in any place. And the money, he brings it up and he eats it in Jerusalem, as it says, that you will take with the money, as we talk about in the book of Deuteronomy, that the Torah describes. Moshe tells the Jewish people what the advice is, that if you can't take all the produce, you redeem it with money, and you go and you spend the money in Jerusalem and in the Holy Temple. Verse 32. Now we talk about tithing of animals. And the tithe of cattle or flock, whatever passes under the rod, the 10th one is holy to God, is sanctified to God. What does it mean under the rod? When a person decides which is number 10, he takes them out of the walk out of the doorway, and he makes them one go after the other, and he numbers them 1, 2, 3. The Hasidi, when it comes to number 10, Make gives it with, he used to have like a rod that had like a paint on it. B'shevet Tzavua B'sikra, it had like a red paint on it, and he would leave a sneaker shumaister, and you have to mark it that this is the tithe one. This is the 10th one. This is what he used to do with their sheep. La'agolim, to the calves, Shekol Shana V'Shana, that were born every year. Kodesh has to be holy. This was holy that he had to bring it to the holy temple to bring its blood and its limbs on the altar. The meat was eaten by the owners, because this was not counted with the other 24 gifts that the Kohen would get. We don't find that the meat was given to the Kohen. This was strictly given to the owners. It was a tenth of every one of his flock that were born that year, and it was marked by this red paint that he hit with the stick, and that's why he uses this terminology. Verse 33. Lo yivaker ben tevel, he was not allowed to distinguish between good and bad, meaning he cannot select between good and bad. V'lo yimirenu, should not exchange or distinguish between the good and bad. If a person tried to distinguish between the two and tried to put a blemished one for an unblemished one, so to speak, both the one that he exchanged and the one itself, are holy, they cannot be exchanged, they cannot be redeemed. What does this mean? He shouldn't change. Because since it says in the book of Deuteronomy, it should be from the best choice. So therefore, I would think it says that while he's counting, you should look which one's the better one. The better one should be for number 10. Talmud Leimar. Therefore, the verse tells me, you should not be searching and distinguishing and trying to see which one which one is a blemished one or unblemished one. But whatever is number 10, that's the way it is, and you don't look, you don't go back. We're not saying that then take the 10th one, even if it's blemished, you have to bring it to the altar. You have to eat it, potatoes meiser, as it is the tithe, meaning it has that holiness, but he can't just go sell it in the meat market. As well as he's not allowed to share its wool, or work with it, it's considered a holy animal, even if it's blemished. The Torah then continues in the last and final verse of the book of Leviticus, Eilah HaMitzvahs, these are the commandments, Asher Tziva Hashem es Moshe, that God commanded Moshe, Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people, Behar Sinai, on Mount Sinai. Chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. Be strong, and let us strengthen each other with the study of Torah and Chumash. This is the 7th Torah reading of Parashas Behar-Bechukosai, the conclusion of the book of Leviticus.